Canada-US travel is in free fall and the numbers are staggering. While President Donald Trump has stopped calling Canada the 51st state and its head of state governor, the damage to cross-border travel appears unprecedented.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford and Prime Minister Mark Carney are meeting this hour at Premier Ford's home, with U.S. President Donald Trump and the ongoing trade war expected to be a focal point. As you just heard there, they have opposing views on how to respond in this moment to Donald Trump's tariffs, with Ford saying it's time to retaliate, while Carney says it's time to talk. What are the politics of each? Let's bring in our front bench. This evening, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant is here. He's the CEO of Space Canada now. CTV political analyst and former Conservative Industry Minister James Moore is with us. He's a policy advisor at Edelman now. And former NDP BC Minister Nathan Cullen is here. He's a senior advisor with Strategy Corp at the moment. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you tonight. I appreciate you making the time. Brian, I'll start with you. What the Prime Minister just laid out, that essentially the argument is that there are times to hit back and there are times to keep talking. How long do you think that argument holds water with Canadians? Like the position he has now, that now is the time to talk and not fire back. How long does he have that resonates?
The political tensions have created an environment where even routine business between the two nations has become fraught with uncertainty. Ontario Premier Doug Ford's recent meeting with Prime Minister Mark Carney highlighted the deep divisions in how to respond to American tariffs, with Ford advocating for retaliation, while Carney pushes for continued dialogue. But here's what's shocking. Despite this travel apocalypse, one major Canadian airline is doubling down on American routes. Air Canada just announced 3 new U.S. destinations for 2026, defying every trend in the market. This isn't just about airline schedules, it's about a calculated bet that could reshape North American aviation. To understand why this matters, we need to look at the carnage first. The monthly Statistics Canada report for September 2025 shows the number of Canadians returning home from trips to the U.S. was down 27% compared to the previous year. That's not a minor dip, that's a travel collapse. Airlines across Canada have been slashing routes like never before. Air Canada and WestJet canceled flights to secondary U.S. cities such as Washington, D.C., Houston, and Austin from Montreal and Calgary earlier in the year amid lower demand. But the scale of this collapse is even more dramatic than these individual route cuts suggest. Airline bookings between the U.S. and Canada are down by 70% compared to the same time last year, according to aviation analytics company OAG. Through the end of October, more than 320,000 seats have been removed by airlines operating between the two countries. OAG wrote that future flight bookings between Canada and the U.S. have collapsed. This isn't just affecting major carriers. Canadian budget airline Flair Airlines announced cuts to flights from Toronto to Nashville, as well as from Calgary to Las Vegas and Edmonton to Las Vegas. The company attributed these moves to reduced demand, saying these are the types of routes they are not confident in being able to sell at a rate that would make it profitable. The human impact tells the real story. PT Tours, a bus tour company based in New Brunswick, called off 8 trips to the United States, including visits to Boston and Washington, along with an October shopping trip to New Hampshire that had been offered for more than 10 years. Owner Phyllis LeBlanc said customers started calling in late January to cancel their bookings. They were uncertain what was going to happen in the States. They didn't feel comfortable, she explained. With all the news going on, people are afraid. The fear isn't unfounded. Trump's bombast and mockery of Canada has fueled a resurgence in Canadian nationalism and started to deter Canadian tourists from the U.S.
By Mark Carney's broken promises on trade, he promised to put his elbows up, handle Trump, negotiate a win, and have a deal by July 21st. Still no deal, still no win, still no elbows, and the only thing that's up are American tariffs on Canada. Since the Prime Minister took office. After his humiliating meeting in the White House last week, the President sensed weakness in Mark Carney and decided to have his Commerce Secretary announce that the auto tariffs would be permanent and to jack up lumber tariffs another 10%. Mark Carney's broken promises and weakness abroad are costing Canadian workers at home. I'm calling on Mark Carney again. Keep your word. You promised you would negotiate a win and get us a deal by July 21st. Those lumber and auto workers and the workers behind me today are counting on Mark Carney to keep his promise and to do it now.
The president's broken promises on trade deals and the announcement of permanent auto tariffs following what many called a humiliating White House meeting have only deepened the rift. As one Canadian wrote on social media, "Just canceled our March trip to Great Wolf Lodge and will be going to West Edmonton Mall instead. Keeping our money in Canada." The unified approach that once defined Canada's response is beginning to show cracks.
I think it's nothing wrong with flattery and all those things if it gets you results. But the coalition the prime minister needs of the premiers and industry supporting his approach, I think is starting to fracture a little bit. I think it's starting to show weakness. It was very unified 5, 6 months ago, but it was all on this bet that we could pacify this president, mollify him, and actually get to a trade deal. But then we hear his trade representative saying, forget it on auto, and then more and more tariffs hitting Canadians and Canadian workers.
And how much of that do you think is sort of, I guess, exacerbated or influenced or impacted, Brian, by the fact that we have kind of adopted the framing that the U.S. wanted heading into these kinds of negotiations, which is sector by sector, right? Like, there's not going to be anything overarching.
Various sectors, including lumber, auto, steel, aluminum, forestry, and fish, are feeling ignored despite attempts at better relations with Trump. The coalition of premiers and industry supporting the prime minister's approach is starting to fracture as tariffs keep increasing while workers lose jobs. The automobile industry represents the big one for Canada's economy, and it's under direct threat.
Essential proposition that everybody understands. Governments aren't very good at picking winners in a free economy. And that's the basic problem here. What's happening, of course, is there's a guy named Donald Trump and his sidekick, Howard Lutnick, who've upset the world order on trade. So we've got to start reacting differently. BC, forestry, huge industry, they'll make it through. It's going to be tough, they'll make it through. Quebec, aluminum, huge industry. They'll make it through. The Americans don't have enough aluminum, they'll make it through. I'm with Lisa on this one. Automakers, the automobile manufacturing sector as a whole is so huge to the Canadian economy. If it continues like this.
The Stellantis plant crisis in Brampton exemplifies the broader challenge, with companies potentially abandoning commitments despite receiving billions in government subsidies. Trump and his Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick have directly targeted Canadian auto manufacturing, creating an existential threat that ripples through thousands of jobs and families. The economic implications are massive. The U.S. Travel Association estimated that just a 10% decline in Canadian tourists could wipe out some 14,000 U.S. jobs. And the drop is on pace to be much larger than that in 2025. In 2024, Canadian tourists spent $20.5 billion US while visiting America. That revenue stream is evaporating. So why would Air Canada choose this moment to expand into the US market? The answer reveals a sophisticated strategy that goes far beyond the current political climate. In March 2025, Mark Gallardo, Air Canada's Executive Vice President of Revenue and Network Planning, told investors, "If we can de-risk this a little bit and move and be a bit proactive and move capacity into other sectors where we see strength, I think that's the right move right now in this context." What Air Canada sees that others don't is an opportunity hidden within the crisis. While Canadian leisure travel to the U.S. has collapsed, business travel patterns and connecting traffic through Canadian hubs remain viable. The airline strategy focuses on what aviation experts call sixth freedom traffic, passengers from the United States connecting through Canadian hubs to reach destinations in Europe and Asia. The 3 new routes Air Canada announced for May 2026 are strategically chosen. Toronto to San Antonio will operate 3 times weekly, while Montreal will get daily flights to both Cleveland and Columbus, Ohio. These aren't random picks. As Alexandre Lefebvre, Air Canada's Vice President of Planning and Scheduling, explained, "Our big focus and our big success over the past few years have been in those unaligned markets where we've got a right to win. Cleveland, Columbus, and San Antonio are all markets that fit this description, mid-sized U.S. cities with no single dominant hub airline. This gives Air Canada a competitive advantage that major U.S. carriers can't easily replicate. The airline isn't just betting on Canadian-U.S. travel recovering, it's positioning itself to capture American passengers who want to connect to Europe and Asia through Toronto and Montreal. The broader trade context makes Air Canada's move even more remarkable.
We're getting, as you know, as of November 1st, I could move it up if I wanted, a 100% tariff over and above what we get now. So that would make it about 157%. And China doesn't want that, and they want to talk, and we're talking. And I think we'll make a deal that will be good for both. I think we will do something. But you have to understand, we never got anything from China. It was a one-way street. For many years, for decades, it was a one-way street. And they became rich because of the United States. And frankly, presidents that, let's be nice, they didn't know. They just didn't know. They didn't understand what was happening to them. But I understood it. I understood it long before I ran for politics. I used to watch in amazement at how stupid our country was, how stupid they were. And we're not stupid anymore. And that includes with the European Union, that includes with Japan and South Korea. All we want to do is be treated fairly. But the fairly is hundreds of billions and even trillions of dollars coming into the United States. And it's our national security is secure because of tariffs. If we didn't have tariffs, we would have no national security. So it's very...
With Trump discussing potential 100% tariffs on China and extending his new trade stance to the European Union, Japan, and South Korea, the global trade environment has become increasingly volatile. The president's assertion that tariffs are essential for national security and his declaration that America is not stupid anymore in trade dealings has created a new reality for international business. There's also a code share element to Air Canada's strategy. Earlier this year, American Airlines cemented a code share partnership with Toronto-based Porter Airlines. This means American Airlines travelers can earn loyalty points on flights purchased through Porter Airlines and connect to the larger network of smaller Canadian cities. It's a sign that even U.S. carriers see value in Canadian connectivity. The timing of Air Canada's announcement is crucial. While Cirium data shows that Air Canada's seat count to the U.S. was down by 9.2% in the third quarter of 2025, the airline has consistently hinted that it hopes to bring capacity back to summer 2024 levels by next year. The new routes spell optimism for the travel industry that has been hit particularly hard in cities like Las Vegas. John Graddick, an aviation management professor at McGill University, believes this is the right call. I think what Air Canada has decided in its analysis of the marketplace is that it's a short-term blip, he told Travel Weekly. They are looking at this reduction in demand holding through maybe the beginning of November when the snow starts to fly and Canadians want to get away from winter. But there's another factor at play that most analysis misses. While Canadian travel to the U.S. has plummeted, American travel to Canada has actually increased. Many Americans look to support Canada with their money over the spring and summer, creating a reverse flow that Air Canada can capitalize on. The new routes aren't just about serving Canadians, they're about capturing Americans who want to visit Canada or connect through Canadian hubs. The aircraft choices for these routes reveal Air Canada's careful approach. The Toronto-San Antonio route will use an Airbus A220-300, while the Montreal-Cleveland and Montreal-Columbus routes will operate with Embraer E175 aircraft. These are right-sized aircraft for medium-demand routes, showing that Air Canada isn't overcommitting but is testing the waters carefully. Air Canada's broader expansion plans are even more ambitious. The airline announced plans to grow transborder capacity between the U.S. and Canada by about 15% year over year in summer 2026. This comes as the airline targets 10 to 15 new U.S. destinations within the next 3 years, aiming to serve 60 to 65 U.S. airports by 2028, up from its current 50 destinations. The fleet modernization supporting this expansion is substantial. Air Canada has secured orders for 83 new aircraft, including 27 Airbus A220-300, 30 Airbus A321XLR, and 18 Boeing 787-10 scheduled for delivery through 2029. The A321XLRS, in particular, will allow the airline to serve transcontinental routes more efficiently. What makes Air Canada's strategy particularly clever is its focus on markets where routing through Canadian hubs creates efficient pathways to European connections. As travel patterns shift and Americans look for alternatives to traditional hub-and-spoke models, Air Canada's Toronto and Montreal hubs offer compelling options for reaching Europe and Asia. The political dimension can't be ignored either. While Trump's tariffs and rhetoric have devastated leisure travel, they've also created opportunities. Canadian nationalism has surged, but so has American interest in supporting Canada. Air Canada is positioning itself to benefit from both trends, serving Americans who want to visit Canada and Canadians who are ready to travel again once political tensions ease. There are risks to this strategy. The travel collapse could last longer than Air Canada expects. Political tensions could escalate further, making any U.S.-Canada travel even more difficult. Competition from U.S. carriers could intensify as they fight to protect their domestic markets. But Air Canada seems willing to take these risks for a simple reason: the potential upside is enormous. If Air Canada is right, and this is indeed a short-term blip, the airline will be perfectly positioned when travel rebounds. Its new routes will be established, its partnerships will be in place, and its reputation as a connector between North America and the rest of the world will be enhanced. If the downturn lasts longer, the airline can always scale back, but the strategic positioning will remain. The broader implications for the aviation industry are significant. Air Canada's move suggests that even in the depths of a travel crisis, opportunities exist for airlines willing to think strategically and take calculated risks. It's a reminder that in aviation, as in many industries, fortune favors the bold. For passengers, Air Canada's expansion offers new options at a time when choices have been shrinking. The new routes will provide more non-stop options, greater flexibility, and fewer compromises when planning trips between the U.S. and Canada. They also signal that despite political tensions, the fundamental economic logic of U.S.-Canada connectivity remains strong. The success or failure of Air Canada's gambit will likely influence other carriers' strategies. If the new routes prove successful, expect to see other airlines following suit. If they struggle, it will reinforce the narrative that the U.S.-Canada travel market has fundamentally changed. What's clear is that Air Canada isn't just reacting to current market conditions. It's betting on the future. The airline believes that travel patterns will eventually normalize, that business connectivity will remain strong, and that its strategic positioning will pay off in the long term. It's a bold move in uncertain times, but it might just be the kind of forward-thinking strategy that separates winners from losers in the airline industry. The next few months will be crucial in determining whether Air Canada's bet pays off. Will Canadian travelers return to U.S. destinations? Will American business travelers embrace routing through Canadian hubs? Will political tensions ease enough to restore normal travel patterns? Air Canada is betting yes on all counts, and that bet could reshape North American aviation for years to come.